Hey there, it's John Miller, founding attorney with Rock Solid Law. Welcome. Appreciate you joining us for this week's webinar in which we will be discussing veterans homestead exemptions in Florida. We have a lot to go over today in a short period of time. I'm sure all of you are ready to strap on and get it done with me. Just real quick. I'm a 35-year real property estate planning and business lawyer. So obviously homestead exemptions are something that play regularly into my life. But beyond that, I currently have my application for the Society of Cincinnati to replace my dear father as a representative of General Andrew Pickens of the United States Revolutionary War. I'm a direct descendant of a general from the Revolutionary War, and our family served basically in every encounter from then through Korea. I have a cousin now who's in the Air Force, but most of our family were Army, including my father's father, who was a lieutenant colonel in OSS World War II. We're proud of his service. He was America's primary liaison with the French resistance and was, in fact, in Hitler's office the day that Berlin fell. So thank you, veterans, for your service. I want you to know that you are among friends here and that we love to support our veterans when and how we can. Of course, you have a fabulous JAG Corps of attorneys that are part of the U.S. military service, although they often are not specialists in some of the areas in which we practice. So sometimes our representation crosses over, thankfully. We have a lot to cover. And so this webinar will try to broadly touch on numerous concepts regarding homestead exemptions, especially for veterans, including the new one that was added to our Constitution in the election a month ago. We're not going to be able to have time to go deep into any of them. I will, at the end of our time together this morning, offer for you to sign up to come in and talk to me about your particular circumstance, to do so at no charge, so that maybe I can give you some specific advice on best courses of action for you particularly. So according to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, we in Florida have about 1.5 million veterans, which is about 10% of our state's population. About 350,000 of those veterans are receiving disability compensation. So the issues that I'm going to talk to you about this morning touch a lot of people in our state. I am sitting in Duval County, Jacksonville Beach, part of Jacksonville, Florida, which is, I think by all accounts, a Navy town. And so hopefully some of you that are here because of your service with the Navy are on the call this morning. So filing and keeping your homestead exemption. First off, every Floridian is entitled to a homestead exemption on their home, and every person who buys a home in Florida needs to apply for that timely and to keep it in effect year after year. The exemptions that are specifically for veterans are on top of that exemption, not instead of. So it's a both and for your veterans. So the eligibility for the property tax exemption extends on satisfying certain requirements. The information is available from your particular property appraiser in the county where the veteran or the veteran's surviving spouse has a homestead, and sometimes property that's non-homestead. Hang on for more about that later. Very special and unusual is that a service member's next of kin or any other person who has written authorization may file for a homestead exemption claim on behalf of the service member who cannot file in person due to a service obligation. That is very unusual under our laws, and as to the best of my knowledge, only available to our military personnel. So keep that in mind. Okay, here's the broad term, and I'm going to read it because I think it's best. It comes straight out of our statutes. A member or former member of any branch of the United States military or military reserves Coast Guard, National Guard, including reserves, if he or she was deployed during the previous calendar year outside the continental United States, Alaska, and Hawaii in support of a designated operation. And our Florida legislature keeps a list of what those are. The percent of the taxable value that is exempt for the current year corresponds to the percent of time during the previous year when the service member was deployed on a designated operation. There's your first one. If you've been deployed in the previous year, there's an exemption available to you. If you meet certain requirements, veterans 65 or older who are partially or totally permanently disabled may receive a discount on the assessed value of property that they own and use as a homestead. The discount is a percentage equal to the percentage of the veteran's permanent service-connected disability, and Veterans Affairs determines that. That's huge. That lowers the value that you're taxed on. Okay, that's two of them. Then, this is an aside. Eligible veterans who want to apply for these exemptions may apply before they even receive the documentation from Veterans Affairs. After the property appraiser receives the documentation, the exemption will be effective retroactively, right? So even if you don't have all your documentation, and we know that can be a little slow for the bureaucracy, you want to get your application in. All right. Next one. Fantastic. So, you got that discount we just talked about for the time that you were deployed, right? In an operation. How about this? For the armed forces only. If you own property, which is your homestead, you can rent it out while you're away. You can collect rent on your property, and you do not lose your homestead as long as it is your homestead. If you're coming back to it, if you plan to come back to it, you can rent it out. Now, we're going to talk a little more about surviving spouses as we go forward, but some of the exemptions are available to surviving spouses. If you're a surviving spouse of a military person who died from service-connected causes, you will be entitled to the Homestead Exemption, and that is the Fallen Heroes Act. And I am proud that we honor our fallen heroes in this regard by taking care of their families. Next, I know this is a lot, You can always email me if you have a specific question or take advantage of the opportunity to come sit with me. An ex-service member who is honorably discharged and is a resident of Florida and who is disabled to at least 10% because of a misfortune while serving during wartime may be entitled to a $5,000 reduction of his or her property's assessed value. Okay, here we go. That's a both and. This can take another $5,000 off the value. And listen, this is amazing. This exemption is not limited to homestead, right? This can be on investment or rental property or a second home as well. Under some circumstances, that can carry over to a surviving spouse. It's worth checking into. And this one is truly amazing. And this is what got me started on this subject, because I had to do some research for a really cool client. Veterans who are Florida residents, right? That means you have a homestead in Florida, and were honorably discharged. So if there's a dishonorable discharge, all this is out the window. With a service-related total and permanent disability may be eligible for a, listen up, boom, I'm looking over my glasses at you, total exemption from ad valorem taxes on property that they own and use as their homestead. 0 taxes for those with service-related total and permanent disability. So I am also able to tell you that the veteran and his or her spouse are able to transfer the homestead into a revocable trust as part of their estate planning and maintain that 100% exemption from taxes. I had to do the research on that one, and there is an opinion from the Department of Revenue, state of Florida, that states that that exemption remains in effect. 100%. Okay. A similar exemption is available to disabled veterans confined to wheelchairs. And that goes further into outfitting the property so that the veteran can use it while confined to a wheelchair. And sometimes the surviving spouse may be entitled to that. So my client, unbeknownst to me, had a permanent total disability. And you wouldn't know it sitting and talking to them, but I learned that they had that and that exemption on their home. So we were able to help them carry through their estate plan and using a revocable living trust. If you want to know more about that, there's all sorts of videos on our website, which is Rock Solid Law / I think videos on the website. You can learn more about what a revocable living trust can do. But we were able to help them, and they were able to maintain their homestead status, including that exemption, while taking care of their family, and actually some charities to complete their estate plan. So I don't get to say this too often anymore, but I wrote down Duval. So I'm sitting in Duval County, Florida. So I'm going to use our county as the example of what you would find on your county's website with regard to these veterans exemptions. For those of you who live in Duval or are interested in checking out Duval, the website is www.coj.net. That's City of Jacksonville, coj.net. So you would find there the exemption for deployed service members. There's an additional homestead. Remember, this is all in addition to the standard homestead that all Floridians receive. By the way, I probably haven't mentioned it in this session. I've taught on homestead on here before. The videos are available. Florida has one of the most protective, and I would argue best, homestead exemptions in the world. We protect our homeowners in their homes in Florida. We believe that home ownership is sacrosanct. And if you've heard me talk before, you probably heard me say that I believe that home ownership is the cornerstone of the American dream. It is. We were certainly the first country in the world to allow common people like you and me to own our homes. And I very proudly pat the lawyers on the back who wrote that into our initial Constitution. Guess I ought to figure out someday who were the ones that drafted in that clause. But we are the first to allow for private ownership. And therefore, I consider that private ownership of our own castles, in Florida, our sand castles, as the cornerstone of the American dream. So in addition to your regular homestead, members of the active duty military reserves, and including National Guard, remember, get an exemption based on the number of days they were deployed the year before. And that's different from the other exemptions because there's no set dollar amount to be exempted. Rather, a prorated percentage will be exempt based on the amount of time the service member was deployed during the previous year. Who's eligible? Service members who currently receive a homestead exemption and were deployed during the previous year, right? The Florida legislature decides which operations are included. More information on what you need to supply for each of these categories available at coj.net. And I'm absolutely confident it's available in every county in Florida on their website. Again, veterans confined to a wheelchair. We talked a little bit about that already. You have to be honorably discharged, have a service-connected total, but not necessarily permanent disability, exempt from taxes. And this one has no income limitations to qualify, so it would not matter how much. You just have to use a wheelchair for mobility, and you receive some financial assistance due to the disability. which requires specially adapted housing. I referenced that before, like a RAM. So on the website, it also talks about the 10% or greater disabled veteran that we already discussed, who gets a $5,000 exemption for a disability of 10% or greater, who is a permanent and legal resident of Florida. Remember, if you're not a Florida resident, these rules don't apply. Check your own state. We talked momentarily ago, and it's on the COJ website, about an honorably discharged veteran who has a service-connected total and permanent disability. You're going to be totally exempt from paying taxes. The more common one is veterans age 65 or older with a combat-related disability. Let's see, let me do the math. We're probably getting to the point where not only the Vietnam vets, but those involved in the desert operations will be turning age 65 and therefore will qualify for a percentage discount in property taxes equal to the percentage of a partial or total permanent service-related disability. So it's very important to keep the documentation regarding those service-related disabilities, because they're going to need those in order to give the exemptions. Now, moving on to surviving spouses, and I think this is really cool because I think we should take care of the families of our veterans. That's something I actually feel very, very strongly about. The surviving spouse of an honorably discharged veteran who had a service-connected total and permanent disability is entitled to keep the exemption or transfer the exemption if already granted. It's up to 100% of assessed value. So if the service member dies, the spouse will be able to keep that exemption and therefore keep their house. I love the part about it can be transferred, because there was a period of time where they were stuck in that house and couldn't transfer that benefit to another house. So maybe, they want to downsize. Certainly they have a smaller family after the veteran's no longer living. And they would be able to keep that benefit. Also, the surviving spouse of the 10% or greater veteran can keep that exemption if the spouse was married to the veteran for at least 5 years at the time of the veteran's death, and the surviving spouse has not remarried. The veteran does have to have been a resident of Florida at the time of death. This is fascinating to me. It is not required that the veteran was granted the exemption prior to death, nor is it required that the veteran owned or resided in the property, which is really cool because that allows the spouse to take advantage of these exemptions, even if the veteran didn't do it during their lifetime. So spouses of deceased veterans also need to pay attention to these wonderful exemptions. We're doing pretty well. I know we're moving fast this morning, gang. Hope you're hanging in. Hope you had your coffee. I've got some more really cool information that I'm going to try to impart in the next 10 minutes or so to you. We usually try to keep these to 30, 35 minutes. So let's see how we do. The surviving spouse of a veteran who died on active duty. We talked about the HEROES Act, right? Property owned and used as a homestead by the surviving spouse of an armed forces veteran, U.S. Armed Forces, of course, who died from service-connected issues while on active duty is exempt from taxation on their home. The veteran must have been a permanent resident of Florida on January 1st of the year in which he or she died. Their surviving spouse must reside on and hold legal or beneficial title to the property and not remarry, similar to the last one, right? And if the surviving spouse sells or moves the property, the exemption may be transferred to the new residence if it's the spouse's primary residence and he or she does not remarry. Okay? So quick overview of what's available to the veterans, what's available to the spouse. And now I want to talk to you. I mean, this is a hot topic, right? In case some of you didn't notice, we just had an election at the beginning of last month. And if anybody's interested, Chapter 196 of the Florida statutes is where these exemptions are found. But I sort of trust that you're trusting me to read them and therefore not wanting to do them yourself. But you're welcome to go read them and talk to me about them anytime. So, wow, we had an election. By all news accounts, it was quite divisive across this country and remains so. However, in one particular regard in Florida, it was not divisive. And so let's all have a deep breath. I just took a CLE on meditation for attorneys. I'm trying. Slowing down is not what I'm best at. And talk about Amendment 6. Remember when you went to the polls? I'm sure that Amendment 6 was the first thing on your mind when you got there. Apparently, most Floridians had done their homework and come to the same conclusion. So what was Amendment 6? There were a whole bunch of them on there. There's those long things on the back of the ballot that everybody sits and ponders over. Hopefully you looked them up beforehand, because it's just impossible right there in the voting booth to figure out what to do. Little editorial aside. Okay, so Amendment 6 provides that the homestead property tax, try that again, provides that the homestead property tax discount for certain veterans with permanent combat-related disabilities carries over to the veteran's surviving spouse. Sound familiar? This is what we've been talking about. Who holds legal or beneficial title to and who permanently resides on the homestead property until the spouse remarries or sells or otherwise disposes of the property. This is a constitutional amendment. You know, all of us go to law school wanting to do constitutional law, so this is my moment this morning. The Constitution of the state of Florida is at issue in this election, and we as voters were able to decide whether to extend that exemption to the spouses of combat wounded, of veterans with permanent combat-related disabilities. So under some conditions, it can be transferred to a new homestead. I would absolutely encourage you to consult with a competent real estate lawyer before making that decision to make sure that you don't lose that amazing exemption, okay? So looking back at this from before the election, has there been anything similar to this in Florida before? Yes. There have been homestead tax discounts for veterans in Florida, which have started in 1980 and have been amended up to 12 times. In 2006, Florida voters approved Amendment 7, which allowed disabled veterans 65 years or older to take a discount on their homestead property tax equal in proportion to the amount of the disability as determined by the Veterans Affairs. So in 2010, it extended it to active military personnel by approving Amendment 2. And that's the time served on active duty outside the U.S. that we've talked about. And then it amended Article 6. It also added a new section to Article 12 of our state constitution, which was designed to allow homestead property tax discount to be transferred to the surviving spouse of a deceased veteran. The discount is in effect until the spouse, remarries or sells the property, or gives it away, I guess. If the spouse sells the property and does not remarry, the spouse's new primary residence is available to receive a homestead, not exceeding the dollar amount from the most recent ad valorem tax roll. So what was on the ballot? It allowed this homestead exemption of certain veterans with permanent combat-related disabilities to pass automatically to the deceased veteran's surviving spouse. The exemption would remain in effect until remarriage or disposition. The amendment would obviously provide additional financial assistance to veterans' widows. So what was the discussion? Well, detractors noted that it would adversely affect funding for local schools, and school tax revenues would fall by $400,000. There'd be a recurring loss of $1.6 million. non-school tax revenues would take an initial hit of about $600,000 with a recurring loss of 2.4 million. Interesting to me that the Florida League of Women Voters was against this amendment. And the argument was to keep revenue for police, fire, and schools. The more academic argument was to keep tax law changes out of the Constitution. Usually, taxation is handled by the legislature, right? So once it's in the Constitution, it becomes much, much more difficult to amend or change. Of course, the main argument of voting for the amendment was to honor the service of the veteran who had a combat-related injury, and especially to honor the surviving spouse of that veteran to give them a tangible reward. Probably the main two reasons to vote against it, again, that tax breaks shouldn't be in the Constitution, or if you feel giving special tax breaks at all is just not a good thing, because you feel if you give special tax breaks to some, the rest of the taxpayers have to pick up the tab. And of course, that's the case. So you're probably Googling away, but I'm going to have a spoiler. How did it turn out? Well, 90% of Floridians voted in favor of this exemption of being a part of our Constitution to honor the spouses of these veterans, and only 10% voted against. There were more than 10 million votes cast in regard to this issue, and 9.3 million voted in favor of it, while 1 million and change voted against it. So the result being that more than 60% of the voters approved the surviving spouse of a deceased veteran could receive the homestead property tax discount transferred to them. One more time, if the spouse sells the property and moves into a new primary residence, they may still qualify for the homestead discount, which may not exceed the amount of the prior discount they had, right? So if you upscale, you only get the same discount you used to have. You downscale, it's going to be, again, the full value of the property, no greater than what you had. If they remarry, they lose the discount. So quick practice pointer, you or the people you're advising should file all required forms and applications for these exemptions with your county property appraiser. It's never too early to start if you think you have one coming to you, because the documentation can be trailing. I would urge all veterans and spouses for whom these exemptions are available to make application at your earliest opportunity. If the property appraiser were to deny the application, there is a petition to the Value Adjustment Board of the county to have that reviewed and perhaps overturned, assuming the facts are in your favor. So that's all I've got. That's a lot, right? There are a lot of homestead exemptions available to veterans in Florida. We value our veterans in Florida. One of my earliest memories is the armory that was near my home in the Broadwater neighborhood of St. Petersburg. And of course, living in Jacksonville Beach, Mayport Naval Station is right up the road from us, and we regularly see their ships. So thank you again to all of those who took time to be with us. The recording will be up on our website as soon as it's available. And to say thank you, I would offer anybody listening to this a 30-minute chat consultation to review your particular homestead exemption situation, and also to advise you on best course of action for that, as well as to review any estate planning needs you might have. That would be with me. I will waive the fee, so you'd be saving about $225 there. I would require that you schedule that you call or email our office to schedule that before 5 o'clock this Friday, which is tomorrow. The appointment doesn't have to take place. In fact, it's very unlikely you could get on my calendar between now and then, but I'd like you to make the appointment before then to take advantage of this offer. Again, thanks for joining. Thanks to all the veterans out there. for me, it's been particularly wonderful to honor my military service heritage by providing this information to you. You are so welcome. Thank you for being here this morning. Really appreciate y'all. You know what? And I actually do appreciate the little thanks notes, guys. It makes me feel good because we're just trying to push out some education, make our world a better place. Happy December. Happy holy days. Be a little extra kind in 2020. Maybe pass it forward and take good care of a veteran. Maybe you can reach out and do something special for a veteran this month. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Rebecca, you're very welcome. Appreciate all of you. Oh, that's great, Frank. Appreciate all of you being here. Yes, please do pass this information along. I think it's important. People just don't know. That's great. You've got a friend who might be able to take advantage. Oh, you can change their lives, man. And that's what we're all about. All right. John Miller, live long and prosper. Have a great week. I would tell you what am I talking about? Oh, next week, if the realtors online next week, we're going to talk about our brand new Portability Calculator, which is on our website, which is an awesome thing for your customers and to help you build your practice. You can show your listing customers and clients what they're going to be able to transfer as far as a tax benefit to the new home. So if you know me, you know I love keeping tax in our clients' pockets if it's at all legal. Thanks, y'all. John Miller, founding attorney, Rock Solid Law.